He kōna e purangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Hi there, it's Claire here, and we're about to get to this week's episode. But before we do, I just wanted to give you a heads up about a new video on RNZ that might be of interest to you. It's called Antarctica in a Warming World. And in it, Antarctic researchers talk about what's happening on the icy continent and what this means for our future. You can find that right now under the video tab of the RNZ website, rnz.co.nz. Now, on with the show.
Dismal, appalling and an environmental emergency. That's how experts have described the state of New Zealand's fresh water in reaction to the latest national report.
The Our Freshwater 2023 report, compiled by the Ministry for the Environment and Stats NZ, had some damning statistics when it came out.
An estimated 45% of our total river length is not suitable for swimming due to bacterial contamination.
And among those stats was the one that said that over a third of lakes surveyed were in poor ecological condition, or were entirely without submerged plants. It's something most of us don't often think about. This out of sight, out of mind underwater forest. But Mary de Winton thinks about it.
We've got some of the old accounts from the old botanists of the day, and we've got good descriptions of lakes that at the moment they don't have any vegetation at all. Back in the 1800s they had a huge raft of plant species growing right across the bed of the lake. We know that we've lost that particular community from a number of our lakes, and it is through degradation, water quality, reductions in light and the pest fish issue.
Kia ora, nau mai haramai ki te ao hurahanga. Hello and welcome to Our Changing World. Ko Claire Kincannon tēnei. Today, we meet some of New Zealand's native freshwater plants. Plus, we learn about a project called Rototurf, aimed at helping these plants return to our lakes. Mary de Winton is a freshwater ecologist with Earth Sciences New Zealand in Kirikiriroa, Hamilton. We've gone for a short drive from the main offices so she can show me around the Ruakura Aquatic Research Facility.
Come this way first and I'll just give you a rundown of the lay of the land here. So I was talking about the wastewater polishing. Hi.
Hello.
I was talking about the wastewater polishing kind of research that's done here. So they actually hook into the septic system of the campus and actually have it feeding in here, and then they can experiment on the wastewater to see, algal treatments, sedimentation, all sorts of treatments to see what they can achieve with the water quality.
It's full of large oval black plastic tanks with slow-moving paddles and pipes feeding in and out of each one. But that's not what we're here to see.
The part that we're standing in here is what we call the tank farm. For obvious reasons, there's a range of different sized containers for holding water. There's flowing water, there's static water, there's even sort of climate controlled, temperature controlled tanks as well. And this gives us the perfect environment for learning about propagating and culturing aquatic plants, the plants that grow, in the water, under the water.
A huge range of tanks, it looks like, some of them in kind of brick, and then there are others that are covered. Is that what you mean by the temperature controlled?
We've actually got the temperature controlled ones under the hoods up there.
Oh, so yes, okay.
Sort of thermal hoods to help retain the temperature. There's even some lighting systems up there as well.
Yes, I see a kind of pinkish light on there.
Yes, but we also have paddle wheels to create flowing water environs as well. So a whole range of water-based mesocosms, if you like to use that term. So come this way.
We pass by a big area filled with concrete tanks on our left, and a building where the tea room is on our right, until we get to a smaller fenced area with a large padlocked chain link fence.
This is actually a secure compound.
In case the plants escape.
So there are some nasty plants.
I mean, I was joking, but Mary is serious. They've also got some cultures of the most invasive pest weed plants here, so that they can study them.
Things like water hyacinth, the world's worst weed, growing in this compound.
It's quite a title, the world's worst weed. What makes them so bad?
Oh, just incredibly invasive. Big impacts on, clogging waterways, interfering with hydrogeneration, navigation, whole range of issues. Luckily, well contained and well managed in New Zealand, but massive problems overseas.
So we have it, but we have it under wraps. Invasive plants are part of the interwoven challenges our freshwater systems face. But for now, let's focus on the natives. Mary brings me over to a collection of 8 or so round plastic tanks with green mesh covers over them to introduce me. First, milfoil, or myriophyllum.
This is one of the plants that we were looking at for the rototurf project. And you can see that it's a very feathery plant.
Quite delicate looking.
Very delicate looking. Of course, like all aquatic plants, it doesn't have much structural tissues, so it doesn't sort of stand up stiffly. It's very limp and very floppy. Myriophyllum, I would call it a tall, vascular plant. So that tells me that it's a plant which will grow from the shallows through to about mid-depth ranges, so sort of 8 metres maybe at a pinch. There's other plants which definitely grow shallower, and we can see some of them in this tank here. Little tiny turf plants, so only a few centimetres tall, forming a turf just like you'd find, looks a little bit like a golf course, turf.
It does, yeah.
So, just tiny plants. They're the ones which grow in the shallows of the lake where there's water level fluctuations, and they're very capable of growing out of water for periods of time, so we call them the amphibious turf plants. So tiny little plants that do really well at the edges of lakes. I'll take you over and show you the pondweed.
And these are all growing in little circular tanks with some green plastic mesh over them.
So we're just growing them in mixtures of topsoil and sand. We're growing them under this shade cloth here. All aquatic plants are very shade tolerant because they have to grow under the water, and the water filters out, reflects the light and filters out the light. So they're all very shade adapted plants. It's helpful if we grow them under shade cloth because it cuts down on the algal problem. So, green slime. Green slime is the bane of our, propagation and culture work here at the facility. So this is a pondweed. Looks a little bit different from the milfoil. So the milfoil being that feathery, very fluffy appearance, and this one's got long, linear leaves, very green. And you can see here, it's starting to flower.
Yes,
so
it's got a little stalk.
So they grow up to the surface and they flower at the surface, lay down seeds, then those seeds drop off and go to the bottom of the lake.
Yeah, it's a more robust looking leaf than the milfoil for sure.
That's right, yes.
Kind of looks like a blade of grass,
Yes.
but shorter. Lots of little blades of grass.
That's it, yeah, very grassy looking one.
But it's floppy still.
Yep, very, like I said, not much structural tissue. So you can sort of move with wave action and things like that. So they are remarkably robust in our lakes and rivers, but they don't have that, that stiffness that we tend to think of with a terrestrial plant. And here's a close cousin of that pondweed. This is another pondweed, red pondweed or manahi, and it's got its surface leaving. Yeah, it's got surface leaves as well as underwater leaves. So 2 different kinds of leaves on the one plant.
Oh, and they're quite different.
Yes, so the minute it gets to the surface, it starts growing these little oval leaves that float on the surface of the water.
Yeah, kind of olivey coloured. They're really pretty.
Yeah, so the milfoil and the pondweed were the main 2 species that we ended up focusing on for the rototurf project, mainly because they're quite common. They're found, right across New Zealand. They are robust plants, and of course, if we're trying to introduce plants to a degraded water body where it's quite challenging for a plant to grow, we really want to make sure we've got quite robust species that we're going to be dealing with, that it can grow tall in the water column, get close up to the surface where the light is, and also able to develop a good root system that is going to anchor them in those soft sediments in the lake. So those are the reasons we went for these 2. We did look at a range of other different species, and I'll just pull one out of this tank here, which is called quillwort. This is where I get a damp sleeve reaching into the tank.
Going a bit further down.
So here we have Isoetes, which looks I guess it's like a little flax or something, with a single point where it grows from, and then there's these very stiff little quills that are sticking up.
It kind of reminds me of like lanky aloe vera almost.
Yeah, yes.
And maybe it's the kind of dapple on its in its blades.
Yeah. So that's Isoetes, another plant that we looked at potentially for revegetation, but looking at the traits of this plant, it seems like it's well suited to very, clean lakes with clear water. And when we are trying to revegetate a degraded lake with very poor water quality, this plant would struggle.
Right.
So we've really gone for the more robust, more tolerant plants.
What Mary is hinting at here is the chicken or egg type problem facing restoration of our native freshwater plants. They've disappeared from the system because the lakes are in poor condition. Returning plants would help improve that condition. But the plants can't get started in the lakes because, well, the lakes are in poor condition. So how do you give them the leg up they need to get going? This was the whole idea behind the RotoTurf project. A collaboration that involved Matahuru Marae, Attica Hopkins of AM2 and Associates, and the University of Florida. And where roto in RotoTurf refers to the Te Reo Māori word for lake.
With the degradation of water bodies with big loads of nutrients and sediments that are flowing into our lakes, the water quality gets very poor. The water itself gets very murky, either from algal blooms or from suspended sediment. And when you get those kinds of environments, there's very little light that's getting down to the bottom where the plants are growing. And if you lose those plants, it's incredibly hard to get them back again. For one thing, if they've got seed that's left in the sediment, it hasn't got many reserves, it's not going to be able to germinate and grow up tall enough that it's going to get to the light. And there's also the problem that over time, those seeds age and die, they're buried. So you're left with a lake that doesn't have any kind of potential to revegetate from the seed bank. So we were going to give nature a helping hand and see what we could do in terms of introducing good, robust plants that are in a state where they are able to cope with the environment and grow up and then expand from these plantings. And we sort of hit on the idea of almost like instant turf, where you're rolling out grass onto a new build, trying to come up with ways that we could grow the plants, have them in some kind of matrix that would hang together long enough for us to put it in the lake, and then that matrix would kind of disappear or become part of nature over time.
Right, so you needed something biodegradable
We needed something biodegradable, and we started looking at a whole range of natural products. So we started with things like coconut fibre, hessian, just like carpet backing, in the, as you used to have in the old days. Hessian, also there's a very loud frog.
Is that what it is?
Yes, we do get a lot of frogs here. Yeah, so,
wow, that's such a bizarre sound. Where is that even coming from?
I would say just over there somewhere.
And that's just, they just show up, they hang out.
They hang out here. Sorry.
Do they cause trouble when you're trying to cultivate plants?
They do. Their tadpoles can, because the tadpoles can nibble on the plants. So there is a little bit of control work that is undertaken on the tadpoles particularly. It's quite good having the covers on, because that just keep the those sorts of issues, the ducks, the frogs, things like that out of our tanks.
And there was an aquatic caterpillar that you had to be careful about as well, right?
Yes, again, there's a native caterpillar that, it's the only aquatic caterpillar in New Zealand. So the moth comes in, lays its eggs, caterpillars go down, munch our plants. So we try and keep those out as well.
This pond moth caterpillar has branched gills along its body, allowing it to feed underwater. And it uses plant fragments bound together with silk to make a snug little case for itself to pupate in. I didn't quite spot the frog that interrupted us, but it would have been an introduced Australian green bell frog, Mary reckoned. But yes, where were we? Mary was telling me about choosing a biodegradable material that would work for their rollout aquatic plant turf idea.
Yeah, so we trialled a range of different biodegradable materials, sort of a matting, if you like, that we could grow the plants in. So we started with hessian, which is just like your carpet backing, sort of a woven jute material. Coconut fibre was another thing we looked at. Muka, which is the fibre from harakeke or flax, and also wool products. So we did a bit of a trial to see how long would these kinds of materials last underwater on top of sediment, what's going to retain its integrity for long enough that we can actually utilise it in this way, and also importantly which really suited plant growth, so which ones could we culture the plants on. And we found that the two best products were actually the wool matting and the muka. So those were the ones that went on to a trial in an actual lake, Lake Oheniwai.
And how did the trial go?
Yeah, the trial was surprisingly effective. Lake Oheniwai is a degraded lake. It's quite nutrient rich. It's got quite poor sediments for plants, quite flocculent, sandy in places, but a lot of sort of pockets of flocculent sediments. It's got pest fish, so I think there's about 4 different species of pest fish in there, or exotic fish, that can interfere with the lake, the substrates and the plants, including koi carp, which there were massive numbers of koi carp in Lake Oheniwai.
Right, and do they eat the plants, or is it just that they're shuffling around in the sediment and disturbing things?
To a large point, they're shuffling around in the sediments. They eat the little grubs, little insects which are living in the mud, and they take a big mouthful of the mud, spit it into the water, and then pick the bugs out of it. So they're not only making the water quality worse by making the waters more muddy, but they're also disturbing the sediment, and that's not a good thing if you're a plant and you're trying to grow in that sediment and anchor in that sediment. So that, yes, pest fish are a real issue for our vegetation.
This unseen frog is super keen to be on tape. We decide to move a little further away so that it's not drowning out Mary. The invasive fish are a problem. Though, thanks to efforts earlier this month, there are fewer koi carp in the Waikato lakes now.
4.6 tonnes of the pest fish were shot, as the New Zealand Bow Hunting Society staged the 35th annual World Koi Carp Classic in Huntly. Now, koi carp are extremely damaging to waterways, so their removal is welcomed by authorities and locals, we should say that.
When they were running the rototurf trial in Lake Oheniwai, the team put cages around the plants to keep the invasive pest fish away. The turf was unrolled on the lake bed in December and left there until August to see how the plants went through the seasons.
And yes, the plants were still there after 8 months, still growing right to the surface. One of the species was doing really well, that was the milfoil, and but both species were able to grow in the lake once they were established.
But then at the end of the trial, you had to take them back out.
Yes, so because this was a project that was a 3-year duration, when we finished we had to remove all the structures from the lakes and kind of leave the plants to their fate with the pest fish. So we haven't been back since to look, but I suspect that they will have been destroyed.
And so what's the next steps? I mean, you obviously learned quite a bit from doing that project. Where to next?
Yeah, good question. There's been some interest from iwi groups particularly, and we've been talking to 2 agencies that are interested in restoring plants to their lakes. So early days yet, but we know that we've got an approach now that we have good confidence in that will be a tool for establishing the plants back in the lake.
In terms of the chicken or egg dilemma, what comes first? Water quality work or plant restoration? Mary reckons you need both.
We would definitely say the best candidates for restoring vegetation in a lake are those that have already had some works undertaken in the catchment, that have already had, some intervention for the nutrient and sediment loads, that have had some riparian planting around the edge of the lake. That gives any kind of in-lake restoration the best chance of success. So definitely that, but we're also, more and more acknowledging the role that aquatic plants can have in terms of protecting and maintaining good water quality. The fact that these plants are growing in the sediment of the lake, their root systems are binding and holding the lake sediments together and stopping it from being resuspended into the water column. Their leaves that are sticking into the water are helping any kind of sediment that's in the water to settle out onto the bed of the lake. And they're also obviously a really great habitat for other aquatic life, for your larval fish, etc. There's also the situations where we have quite large, tall weed beds, and they're actually buffering the erosion on the shore as well. So they're kind of having an influence, having a feedback into the health of the lake.
As well as these physical contributions, there's also evidence that the plants might be altering the lake ecosystem through how their physiology works.
When plants are photosynthesizing, and they're making oxygen as a byproduct, and they're supplying some of that oxygen down into their roots, and their roots are within an environment which can be pretty challenging. So it can be very flocculent sediment, very low in oxygen, very high in organic matter, toxins present, etc. And the fact that the plants can get oxygen down to their roots helps them to keep those roots healthy. But when it's doing that, it's also modifying the environment around its roots by releasing that oxygen. And we're finding that there's an ability of the plants to release oxygen, which can then sort of modify the environment. So we've got an ongoing project which is really looking at the aquatic plants as ecosystem engineers, if you like. And that project has just kicked off and will be continuing for the next 3 years.
The rain begins to fall, so we shuffle into a little empty greenhouse beside the tanks. There are over 75 species of native freshwater plants in New Zealand, found in our slow-moving rivers and lakes. When I ask her about her favourite, Mary pulls that classic scientist move of not actually picking one.
A favourite? I have a group of favourites which are known as the charophytes. So they're our freshwater equivalents of seaweeds. They're actually macroalgae, but they look like plants.
Have you done a lot of diving in some of our freshwater lakes?
I have done 40 years of diving in our freshwater lakes. So yes, I've seen these plants growing in their natural habitat, and we do have a lot of data on where we find them, how tall they grow, the sorts of environments that they grow in. So we've kind of utilised all that information for this project.
And have you seen changes yourself across that time?
I have, and unfortunately it's mostly one way. So we've seen a lot of lakes that have lost their vegetation over the last 4 decades. I can think of 5 in the Waikato off the top of my head that I've actually seen, both in their vegetated state and in a devegetated state several years later. The other thing that we see, of course, is invasions of our lakes by alien weeds, those real problematic weeds which, interrupt our enjoyment and use of water bodies.
What are the main perpetrators in the Waikato in terms of invasive weeds?
We'd loosely call them the oxygen weeds, I guess. So Egeria, Lagrosiphon and hornwort, to give them their common names. So these are the real space invaders that once they're introduced to a lake can only just be a little tiny fragment, and they're then capable of growing these enormous weed beds and essentially filling every part of the habitat for aquatic plants.
Of course, these pest plants are not only in Waikato lakes. In good news, last month it was announced that Lake Ngātu, northwest of Kaitaia, has been officially declared eradicated of Lagrosiphon, 5 years after the entire lake was treated with herbicide. Lagrosiphon was introduced to New Zealand as an aquarium plant. It moved into the wild in about the 1950s and since then has become a problem in many waterways throughout the country. For me, while talking to Mary, I can't help thinking about this in terms of our terrestrial flora, equating oxygen weed to something like gorse or old man's beard. But then also thinking of that joy I get when walking around a patch of native bush that's full of different trees and plants. All those layers you have of forest floor ferns and shade-loving shrubs and tall trees searching for the light. I wonder if it's the same for her when she's diving.
Yes, certainly. I confess I am a plant nerd, and I definitely get a lot of enjoyment from seeing a diverse array of aquatic plants, growing where they should do, looking healthy. That is quite a buzz for myself and my team when we're out there looking in the lakes.
Do these places still exist?
Yes, they do. Yes, there are some beautiful, stunning lakes in New Zealand that are still supporting some very diverse, beautiful assemblages of aquatic plants.
And Mary hopes. The work they've done in establishing rototurf as a way to help revegetation might assist groups in the future who want to reforest their local underwater patch. Thanks to Mary de Winton of Earth Sciences New Zealand, Kirikiriroa Hamilton. This episode was produced by me, Claire Kincannon, and sound engineering was by William Saunders. Script editing was by Miranda Fisher. If you want to learn more about how some of these pest fish got into our waterways, then I highly recommend the episode of Black Sheep called Invasive, the story of Stuart Smith. I'll link it in the show notes. Photos and links to reference materials can be found in the web article at rnz.co.nz/OCW. And at the bottom of that page, you can find a sign up to our monthly newsletter. And if you have any comments or questions, you can always email me, ourchangingworld@rnz.co.nz. Tēnā koe I whakarongo mai. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Claire Kincannon. Have a great week. Kia pai, the wiki.